Most learning problems don't start with motivation or ability. They start with fatigue. Not dramatic exhaustion, not crisis level burnout, just a quiet, ordinary tiredness that becomes normal over time. When people struggle to focus, retain information, or think clearly, sleep is often treated as a lifestyle issue, something optional, something to fix later. But in practice, it's foundational. Welcome to Learning Reframed, Education Without the Noise. I'm Dr. Ken Feldman, and this podcast looks at how learning actually works inside real constraints, without hype, shortcuts, or unnecessary complexity. Sleep is rarely discussed seriously in learning conversations. It's mentioned, acknowledged, and then set aside, usually because it feels inconvenient. Schedules are full, expectations are fixed, but the assumption is that learning should adapt to sleep loss, not the other way around. But learning just doesn't work that way. Sleep is not a recovery activity that happens after learning. It's part of the learning process itself. Without adequate sleep, attention narrows, memory weakens, and judgment becomes less reliable. What makes this difficult is that the effects of poor sleep are subtle. People don't suddenly stop functioning. They just become less flexible, less patient, less able to integrate new information. Over time, learning starts to feel harder than it really should. One common misunderstanding is that sleep mainly affects memory. Though that's true, but it's incomplete. Sleep also affects how information is processed in the first place. When people are sleep deprived, they rely more heavily on surface strategies, memorizing without understanding, copying without synthesis, completing tasks without integration. They can still produce work, but the work is much thinner. This is why effort alone doesn't fix the problem. Trying harder while tired often leads to frustration rather than improvement. Another critical issue is actually timing. Many learning environments assume that everyone is most alert at the same time. In reality, alertness varies widely. Some people do their best and clearest thinking early in the day. Others don't fully engage until much later. When learning consistently happens during low alert periods, people begin to internalize a false conclusion that they're just not good at learning. But in many cases, it's not a lack of ability. It's a mismatch. It's a mismatch between cognitive demand and biological readiness. This matters not only for students, but for adults as well. Professionals often try to learn late at night, after work, after responsibilities, after their attention is already depleted. The expectation is that learning should happen in whatever time is left. That approach works poorly for anything that requires judgment, synthesis, or in fact, reflection. Learning while exhausted may feel productive, but it rarely holds. There's also a behavioral pattern worth noting. When people are tired, they often shorten their learning cycles. They skim instead of reading. They watch instead of engage. They repeat familiar tasks rather than stretch into new ones. Over time, learning becomes maintenance rather than growth. This isn't a discipline issue, it's a capacity issue. So what actually happens? The first step is treat sleep as a learning condition, not as a personal habit. This means we now need to ask a different set of questions. So instead of asking, how do I push through? You should ask, what kind of learning fits the energy I have? Not all learning requires peak alertness. Review, organization, and light reinforcement can happen when energy is low. But deep thinking, problem solving, and writing usually requires much, much more. Matching your task to energy truly matters. The second step is protecting 1 or 2 high-quality learning windows each week. Not every day, but not for long periods of time. Just enough time when attention is available and sleep has not been sacrificed. Consistency matters more than duration. Finally, it helps to notice when sleep loss becomes normalized. When people forget what clear thinking feels like, they adjust their own expectations downward without even realizing it. Learning improves quickly when rest improves, even before their learning strategies change. So in closing, sleep doesn't guarantee learning, but learning rarely survives without it. When learning feels unusually hard, it's worth asking the question whether the issue is effort or exhaustion, because that distinction matters. If today's episode resonated with you, follow our podcast on your favorite platform and give us a like on YouTube. But more importantly, share this episode with someone who might find it helpful. I'm Ken Feldman, and thanks for listening. See you next time.